Took the foot off the gas a little bit again, didn't we? Tell you what, if we do that Saturday against Ohio State, they're going to put their foot on our necks. Welcome back to Blue and Gold Till I'm Dead and Cold. My name is Chris. I'm your host, and we are here to talk about the Central Michigan game, but yes, give a little bit of a preview to what we might see this coming Saturday before my big preview show coming up later this week. And we're also going to talk about some injuries. Most of the injury news is actually good. But let's start out with that Central Michigan game. So, in the past, Notre Dame has been a team that played up to the level of the competition. They always seem to get up for the big games, but when they play teams like Navy and Duke and stuff, Duke's actually pretty good this year, but in the past they haven't been. And somehow it's only a 1 or 2 score game at the end of the game. So I had some reservations, especially with Ohio State coming up this Saturday. Now, the way we started out the game was outstanding. Both Chris Tyree and Tobias Merriweather, love the fact that Tobias Merriweather is getting more involved in the offense. They each had a 76-yard and a 75-yard touchdown reception, respectively. Sam Hartman, he's the real deal, guys. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in this episode as well, too. What I didn't like was once we kind of got up by 2 scores in the second quarter, we started coasting again. And I don't like to see that. Look, I get it. It's a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds. And yeah, there are a lot of 19 and 20-year-olds on this team because Notre Dame actually has a lot of contributing freshmen and sophomores, more than we almost ever have. And that goes to the depth that Marcus Freeman has been able to get for this team through his excellent recruiting and the recruiting of his staff. So I understand that 19 and 20-year-olds are not a 35-year-old quarterback with ice water in his veins in the NFL. Where playing on the road largely doesn't faze them, or it doesn't faze them anywhere near as much as it does in college. But you still need to do what you need to do against the teams you're supposed to do it against. Now, by the end of the game, it was 41-17 and largely looked like a big Notre Dame blowout, which it ended up being. We outscored them, 20-3 in the second half. But for a stretch there, against a quarterback, Jace Bauer, who wasn't even their starter, their starting quarterback, Bert Emanuel, was out for this game. Last minute scratch. So this kid had to come in that hasn't played a whole lot of football, and he passed for 137 yards against the Irish. Now that's not outstanding, but there's not a whole lot of players on that Central Michigan team that would be able to crack the starting lineup at Notre Dame. So the fact that they were able to put up 137 yards passing and then another 131 rushing was a little bit concerning. Now, I don't think it has anything to do with the talent level of Notre Dame. Again, I think it has to do with they got up by a couple of scores. It looked like they were just going to run away with this, but what they forgot was this was Central Michigan's national championship game. If Central Michigan could go into South Bend and put up a good showing, or God forbid, even knock off the mighty Irish like Marshall did last year, it'd make these kids wouldn't need to win another game all season to be pleased with it. But I will say that they straightened out the ship. Sam Hartman ended up 16 for 26, 330 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, QBR of 87.6. So Sam Hartman is what Sam Hartman is supposed to be, and that is a Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback. The rushing attack, Audric Estime, still a beast. Averaged 8.8 yards per carry with a touchdown, 176 yards. The Irish as a whole rushed for 238. So they got their stuff together. Had a couple of sacks, 4 tackles for loss, lots of passes defense. Didn't have any interceptions, I don't believe. Nope, they did not. But the defense got their act together. We were missing some people, and we're going to talk about them, but just was a little bit worried about what happened in this game, because this isn't the last trap game Notre Dame is going to play this year, folks. Notre Dame has several teams on their schedule that are a lot better than Central Michigan. And a lot of them are sandwiched real nicely in between their difficult games. So, for instance, after Ohio State, let's just suppose Notre Dame is going to win this weekend against Ohio State. Right now, they're 3-point dogs at home. That's fine. But they play Ohio State this weekend. And then 2 games from then, they're going to be playing USC, also at Notre Dame Stadium. But between both of those games, they've got road games against some relatively quality ACC schools. Duke, which beat Clemson to start off the year, and I'm sorry to say this, but Riley Leonard's going to get drafted, folks. That is a real quarterback with some good weapons and a defense that is opportunistic. And then they're at Louisville after the Duke game. Then they come back home to play last year's Heisman Trophy winner, Caleb Williams, his coach, Leonard Riley, and the USC Trojans. Then the next big game on their schedule is Clemson on November the 4th. But guess who's sandwiched right in between USC and Clemson? The Pitt Panthers. Not a powerhouse this year, but they have a quarterback on Pitt who knows Notre Dame quite well. Phil Jurkovec, transferred from Notre Dame. So, and again, you can't tell me that this wouldn't make any of those teams' seasons to knock off the Irish, especially if Notre Dame is on this winning streak and say they do happen to knock off Ohio State and get a win against USC, or even split those 2 games. Look, folks, Notre Dame, there's a path here, as long as they don't get blown out by anybody, that if they lose to one of the 3 big games on their schedule, big teams on their schedule, Ohio State, USC, and Clemson, and they go 11-1 and say they lose by a field goal against the Trojans, Notre Dame could still very well make the college football playoff because of their strength of schedule. It's a good ACC schedule this year that they have to play. And then they finish out the year against Wake Forest and then at Stanford. So making sure that these kids stay focused is going to be a very, very difficult task for Marcus Freeman and this entire coaching staff. Al Golden is going to have to make sure that those defenders of his aren't just playing lackadaisical against teams that they know that they're a higher caliber of athlete than. Now, I don't think we're going to have any issue this weekend. I mean, if you can't get up for Ohio State, you're not going to get up for anybody. But they need to do that consistently this year because people are going to be gunning for them. And why are people going to be gunning for them? Well, Notre Dame, for the first time since, I don't know, probably the Brady Quinn era. I know we've had some other quarterbacks between Brady Quinn and Sam Hartman, but none that you really look at and go, oh, that guy could be a really good pro. Ian Book was nice, but no one looked at Ian Book like a first-round NFL draft pick. Sam Hartman could win the Heisman Trophy this year if things keep going the way they're going. So you look at this team. What has always been the knock on Notre Dame? Well, quarterback, and sometimes they struggle to get the elite skill position players. Well, I tell you what, with Marcus Freeman and Chancey Stuckey and some of these other great coaches and recruiters that quite frankly, Marcus Freeman has brought in, Notre Dame has started to get some real depth on this team. If you look at, pardon me, I had a bug in my face. If you look at the 2 deep of Notre Dame, you'll find a lot of freshmen on there, and that doesn't happen a whole lot. Just the receiving core alone with Jaden Greathouse and Rico Flores. They're getting a lot of field time. Jeremiah Love in our running back room. He's seeing the field as much as anybody in that running back room other than Audric Estime. A couple of linebackers, Drake Bone and Jaden Ausberry. They are the first guys off the bench when guys like Maris Leofau and J.D. Bertrand and Jack Kaiser need a blow, along with, obviously, last year's sensation Jalen Sneed. Christian Gray, very talented cornerback. So there's a lot of freshmen contributing already this year on this Notre Dame team. So the skill positions have gotten better. They've gotten bigger. They've gotten faster. They've gotten deeper, which is what Notre Dame has needed. And now you bring in the icing on the cake, which is a quarterback with the pedigree of Sam Hartman. Owns almost every major ACC passing record available. That is why Notre Dame is going to have a bigger target on their back this year than most, because this is the year, probably the first year since that 2005 Brady Quinn team that lost at home to USC on the tush push play with Reggie Bush, or the Bush push. I don't know what the hell it's called anymore. But the fact of the matter is, even though Notre Dame has been to the playoff 3 times now, they played in the national championship against Auburn, made the college football playoff a couple other times, but this is the most talented team they've had. And the main reason is Sam Hartman and a lot of those skill position players that Marcus Freeman has brought in. Notre Dame is a 3-point dog at home against Ohio State. And that may be the worst position they're going to be in this entire season as far as a betting line. I doubt that USC is going to be a bigger betting line. They may be favored depending on what happens between then and now. But if we beat Ohio State and we're undefeated going into that USC game, USC is not going to be favored to win. I just don't think they will. And they probably shouldn't be. It's at Notre Dame. And as you guys have heard me say multiple times on the show, college football has the greatest home field advantage of any major sport out there. The stadiums are bigger than the NFL, at least for the major teams. The crowds are rowdier, largely because it's a bunch of college students and it's younger. And on the field, as I said in the beginning of this video, it's not a 35-year-old quarterback with ice water in his veins. You largely have a bunch of 18 to 24-year-olds out there that sometimes the moment's too big for them and they get down in the game or get down by a touchdown or two, and all of a sudden they just fold because emotionally they're not mature enough yet to bounce back the way professionals do, which is why some seasons where Notre Dame made it to the college football playoff, it was largely because of the schedule that they had. Not that they didn't play quality teams or that they played cream puffs, but the major teams on their schedule were at home, just like this year. Their 3 biggest games, folks, are Ohio State, USC, and Clemson. And the 2 best ones, Ohio State and USC, are in the shadow of touchdown Jesus. Clemson's having another off year, it looks like. Now, maybe they will clean it up by the time they play the Irish, but that team is struggling to figure out who its identity is. Clemson is not an easy place to go in and win at, but Notre Dame looks to be the more talented team this year. So their 2 juggernaut games, USC and Ohio State, their 2 top 10 games, are both in South Bend. That frickin' matters. It just does. So the target gets larger. You are everyone's Super Bowl, or national championship that's on that schedule, except for maybe Ohio State and USC, who have a legitimate shot at the actual national championship. So, folks, moving forward here, we're going to talk a little bit about injuries and the good news we have coming out of South Bend. So on Monday, at his weekly press conference, Marcus Freeman mentioned that both our middle linebacker, J.D. Bertrand, and our starting safety, DJ Brown, will both play in the Ohio State game. Neither one of them played against Central Michigan. So those are two huge names that we are going to have back for Ohio State. Another name that will be nice to have back for the Ohio State game is Mitchell Evans, our tight end, or one of our tight ends next to Holden Stays. Mitchell Evans, along with J.D. Bertrand, were both concussed in previous games. And although Bertrand is a little further along in the protocol than Evans, Marcus Freeman doesn't think there's going to be any problem with Evans getting on the field against Ohio State. It looks like Gabriel Rubio, one of our main reserve defensive tackles, will also be back for the Ohio State game. That's not etched in stone yet, but Freeman has said that as long as he's feeling good enough to play, he'll play. He was back at practice today, so we'll see. The one name that you won't see out there still is Eli Raridan. Although he dressed for this past game, they didn't put him in there. He may dress for the Ohio State game too, but he's not going to get in there for any amount of time. I don't think he's going to get in there at all. They're taking it real easy, considering this is the second ACL tear on the same knee. And all you had to do was watch the Browns-Steelers game last night to see how easily a reoccurring injury on the same knee can happen. All of our thoughts and prayers go out to Nick Chubb because that was an absolutely brutal injury, and one of those ones that I wish I hadn't have seen because that one doesn't leave your memory too much. But getting back to college here, Notre Dame did what they needed to do against Central Michigan. Yes, they had some slough-off moments, but by the end of the game, it was a blowout. They dominated the second half. Audric Estime cannot be stopped. Notre Dame might have the best running back room in college football. We know they have a top 3 offensive line when they're clicking on all cylinders. They have a Heisman Trophy candidate at quarterback, and they have an outstanding secondary on defense and a deep linebacker room. The defensive line, I think, is a work in progress, but those are all very quality players that are on that defensive line. So coming up later this week, we are going to talk about that big game against Ohio State, get into some more details of it, some more previews. But until then, folks, go Irish, and we will see you next time.